it is. Sure looks strange, doesn't it? I said, yes, sir, that looks strange. It's in a museum in Texas now. It's never been positively identified. In Scituate Harbor, Massachusetts, I went there and interviewed the sheriff, who was the first man on the scene, when back in 1970, this thing washed up on the beach. He said a rock and roll music station came on at 3 in the morning and announced there's a sea monster laying on the beach, and people came from miles, plugged up this little bitty town's highways system, and everybody started cutting off chunks of the sea monster. He said, Brother Hovind, I saw it before it got cut up. He said, I'm telling you, that was some kind of long-neck sea monster. He said, I don't know what it was. Other people said it's a basking shark. That's always their answer, basking shark. It's, standard way to explain it. Could have been, but he said, I saw it before it got cut up, and it wasn't a shark of any kind, not a basking shark. In California, 1925, this critter washed up on the beach. There's the head right there. There's his eyeball. The neck comes down to the right here. This guy behind him has a rifle just in case it moves again. The neck was 20 feet long. The book Shipwrecks and Sea Monsters out there on the table or on my website has all these pictures in there. 20-foot neck. I had one atheist wrote me a letter and said, Hovind, you're so stupid. Don't you know that was a whale? I wrote back and said, just exactly where is the neck on a whale? Ought to be between the front flippers and the head, don't you think? It's not a whale. Duh. One guy said it's a Bard's whale, a rare form of Bard's beaked whale. Well, there's a Bard's beaked whale right there. This thing had a 20-foot neck. I'm sorry, you're mistaken. Okay, it was a new creature. The people who claimed who saw it and examined it said it was a plesiosaurus. If that bothers you, tough. That's what they said. The only reason it bothers some people, though, is because they've already got a preconceived theory that they like. They like the evolution theory because it gets rid of God. It's a wonderful way to leave God out of the picture. Back in the 1930s and 40s, Monterey was famous for having the world's famous sardine fleet. They'd go out there and catch sardines by the gazillions and sell them all over the world. And many folks in the sardine fleet reported sighting creatures like this. One crew said it surfaced right near their boat and stared at the crew with large, baleful eyes from a rounded head that topped a long, slender neck. Notice the shape of the head is shaped like a light bulb. We're going to see that again in a minute. A bulb-shaped head on top of a long neck. There's a book called Mysterious Sea Monsters of California's Central Coast you can get from our website. In 1969, fishermen nearly dropped their rods when they were fishing off one of the bridges in New York City, when the New York Harbor Patrol chased this creature, bigger than a whale, upriver, past one of the largest cities in the world. Couldn't catch it. They didn't know what it was. There are many stories of basilosauruses still alive today. In White River, Arkansas, Newport, Arkansas, there were many folks in the 1970s who reported seeing the White River monster. There were so many reported sightings that Arkansas Senate passed they designated the White River Monster Sanctuary, passed a resolution. It's unlawful to molest, kill, trample, or harm the White River Monster. 1973. I talked to Cloyce Warren, who took that photograph. I said, Cloyce, what was it? He said, Mr. Hovind, honestly, I don't know. He said, I had a whole bunch of pictures from the last roll of film I took. He said, I took them all into the newspaper there in Newport, Arkansas, and said, here, you've been laughing at us for claiming there's a monster in the river. By the way, the river there's 100 feet deep. I said, here's a roll of film. I haven't even opened it. You guys develop it, and you'll see the pictures are right on there. Well, the guy at the newspaper didn't realize it was color film and developed it with black and white developer. Ruined the whole roll. So Cloyce went out and got one or two more pictures. He said, they're not near as good as the other ones I had. I'm sorry. In 1972, I believe, there was a flood that filled in much of the river. These pictures were taken in 71. Arkansas Senate passed a resolution in 73, a couple years later, to protect the White River monster. Off the coast of Jupiter, Florida, there have been many reported sightings of creatures there. One guy wrote me this letter. He said, Dr. Hovind, during the 50s, I was flying off Jupiter, Florida, where I lived. I was 7 or 8 miles out over the Gulf. The water was glass calm. Suddenly, I saw an animal. Its head came out of the water. Its eyes stayed trained on me as I made another pass. It appeared to be 30-plus feet long. Having seen the creature taken by the Japanese fishing boat, and later the drawing of the National Enquirer, I would say this is the same creature. I didn't tell anybody for fear they would think I was nuts. I was working for Pratt & Whitney Aircraft Company with high security. Later, my brother and I caught a pygmy sperm whale for the Miami Sea Aquarium, Captain Gray. I hope this will further support your belief. I get letters and calls and phone emails like this just about every week. I've got huge files of people who claim they have seen something that appears to be a dinosaur in this century. There's a big lake between New York and Vermont called Lake Champlain. Many folks claim they've seen the Lake Champlain monster. I talked to Sandy Mancy that took this picture. I said, Sandy, do you think you saw a dinosaur? She said, oh no, I know I saw a dinosaur. She and her husband and 2 kids watched it for 10 minutes. We'll put at the end of this tape her interview that I did with her describing the creature she saw, a plesiosaurus. 58 people in Lake Champlain saw what appeared to be a creature 30 to 35 feet long swimming off the port side of the boat, 200 feet away. They saw it for 5 minutes. The skipper said, don't tell me it's a fish. If it was, it weighed 3,000 or 5,000 pounds. Discover Magazine ran that article. There are stories in the Bible of dragons in the sea. The dragon in the sea, mentioned in Isaiah 27. In Pensacola, Florida, where I live, back in 1963, 5 teenagers, older teenagers, decided to go scuba diving on the Massachusetts. One of them came back. He made that sketch. He was frantic. He said, that thing ate my 4 friends. Here's the story as he told it. They were scuba diving on a sunken ship called the Massachusetts. I've got page after page after page of interviews, stories and things about this creature, but he said, we were an Air Force rescue raft bound for a sunken ship a few miles off the coast. Midway out, we got caught in a storm and dragged out to sea. When the storm cleared, we were in a dense fog. We began to hear strange noises, rather like the splashing of a porpoise. Also, a sickening odor like dead fish. The noise got closer to the raft, and we heard a loud hissing sound. Out in the fog, we saw what looked like a long pole about 10 feet high, sticking straight up out of the water. On top was a bulb-like structure. He said it bent in the middle and went under. It appeared several more times, getting closer to the raft. The silence was broken once again by something out of the fog. I can only describe it as a high-pitched whine. We panicked. All 5 of us put on our fins and went into the water. Keep together and try for the ship, I yelled. After we got in the water, we became split up in the fog. From behind, I could hear the screams of my comrades one by one. I got a closer look at the thing just before my last friend went under. The neck was about 12 feet long, brownish green and smooth looking. The head was like a sea turtle, except more elongated. He said the eyes were green with oval pupils. In a different book, he interviewed several folks after this happened, and then he stopped giving interviews altogether. But in this book, he said, I don't know how long it was before we heard a scream. It lasted maybe half a minute. Then I heard Warren call, hey, help me, it's got Brad. I've got to get out of here. His voice was cut off abruptly by a short cry. Hey, Brad, Warren, hey, where is everybody? I yelled back at the top of my lungs. Larry now swam with Eric and me. Warren and Brad were nowhere in sight. Right next to Eric, that telephone pole-like figure broke water. I could see the long neck and 2 small eyes. The mouth opened and it bent over. It dove on top of Eric, dragging him under. I screamed and began to swim past the ship. My insides were shaking uncontrollably. That's the sketch of what ate his friends. He said, the next morning I was found by the rescue unit. I shared this story at a meeting one time when I was speaking in Fort Walton Beach, Florida, not far from my house. Edward McClary was the only survivor. After I shared the story, a lady came to me after and she said, Mr. Hovind, my name is Val Bill. My stepson, Larry, was one of the kids who was eaten by that creature. She said, this story you are telling is exactly correct. That's what she said. There's her phone address if you want to write her, if you don't believe me. Down the river, down the bay from us, or down the beach from us, is Panama City, Florida, about 100 miles away. I was speaking down there, and a youth director came to me afterwards. He said, Brother Hovind, I'm a youth director at a Lutheran church. He said, my youth group was in the van driving across the bridge in Panama City, and we saw a creature just like that one you've got in your book down there. He said, the kids all saw it. Everybody saw it in the van, but they all said, man, if we tell anybody, they're going to think we're crazy. There have been many reports like this. Who knows how many have not been reported? I interviewed a lady who grew up in Panama, Central America. She said she was riding her horse along the ocean, on the Pacific Ocean, and she saw a plesiosaur. She's married to a pastor who's a Baptist pastor in Arkansas now. I interviewed her, been several winters ago. I have interviewed probably 80 people face-to-face who said, look, I've seen one. There have been 20,000 reported sightings in the last century. There have been reports of pterodactyls still alive. In Africa, they call it the Kangamato. In Kenya, they call it Batamzinga. That's their name for it. I was sitting in my office one time and the phone rang and this guy said, Mr. Hovind, my name is, they call him Steve. He said, my African name is real long, so they call him Steve. He said, I'm on the Kenya Olympic running team. I'm over here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I'm going to school at Louisiana State. He's graduated now and gone. I don't know what happened to him. He said, you mentioned in your seminar that I just saw that pterodactyls might still be alive. Here's one here on the table. There have been many reports of pterodactyls, and I mentioned this in my seminar. Steve said, Mr. Hovind, I'm from Kenya, and I want you to know we have those creatures in my village. He said, they're only about a 4-foot wingspan. He said, they've got a bump on the back of their head. He said, why do your schools in America say they lived millions of years ago? I said, because we're dumb over here. He said, they're very rarely seen, and most people in my village don't like them, and some people are superstitious about them, because their favorite food appears to be decaying human flesh. So if you bury somebody, you better bury them deep, or Kangamato will come dig them up and eat them.